Welcome, everybody. Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and I have with me today Jerry Bess with Little Shortstop Stores, which is a chain of 30 convenience stores in Ontario, Canada. And what we're going to talk about today is what suppliers should know, what brands should know if they're looking to do business with buyers in Canada, because it's a little different than doing business with buyers in the United States. So we're going to cover all the bases about what you need in terms of packaging and in terms of certifications and all that good stuff. So, Jerry, thanks so much for joining us. And to start off, can you give us just a quick overview of the Canadian market and why brands should want to do business there?
Sure. So the Canadian market has 40 million consumers approximately. And so you can easily do the math. It's 10% of the United States, and probably one of the reasons why you'd want to do business here, because it exposes you to 10% of additional revenue, obviously. Canadian market, there are many similarities to the American market, and there are some differences. But the main thing to understand is that we have the longest standing trade relationship of any two countries in the world, and the biggest trade partnership of two countries in the world. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe 40 of the United States, the number one trading partner is Canada. So the business stretches upon all types of goods and services. And if you want to enter Canada, it's not a big challenge. So if you've got the United States covered and you're looking to find a new opportunity, Canada is obviously probably your easiest choice, because we do have many similarities when it comes to culture and business practices.
So the question should be, why not do business in Canada?
Exactly.
Right? So before approaching a buyer such as yourself, what are some of the things that brands need to have in place? So before they even think of going to Canada, as they're prepping to approach that market, what do they need to have in place?
Well, the first thing is to understand the product or service that they're offering to Canada, whether or not one is allowed. So that's a starting point. So to give an example, a concrete example, we get approached all the time by CBD companies who have products that have CBD. Currently, CBD is only allowed to be sold in Canada in the same stores that sell basically marijuana. So you get approached all the time by companies who believe that the regulations are the same as they are in the United States, but obviously they are not. And so that's one of the starting points is, what is the market for my particular product within the Canadian marketplace? So that's a starting point. After that, there is two official languages in Canada, French and English. So understanding the packaging regulations for your product and ensuring that you comply by the regulations. This should be an easy thing to do, because if you look at Europe, for instance, they have around 20 different languages and they fit them all on a package. So if you're trying to fit two, and if add Spanish, you got three, it should be something that you could be able to do to enter the Canadian market quite easily.
And here they're usually doing Spanish anyway, in a lot of markets here. So they're used to
absolutely
doing dual language. It's just adding another language.
Right. And, the regulations are quite easy to understand. So you don't have to change your brand or change, descriptions for the French language. I would check first to make sure that whatever your brand means in French could be something that you might want to look into. Because I remember a story about when Chevy Nova was being sold into the Mexican market. And you probably know Nova means don't go. So it wasn't a big seller in Mexico, so you might want to just check that as a reference point before you enter the Canadian market.
That's a really good point. Really good point. So what about certifications? I know on the food side, do you have specific certifications that they have to have before getting into the market?
Yeah, exactly. There are many certifications on the food side. The similarities on food are there, right? I mean, that's one of the key things. And if you look at the nutritional labeling, they're almost identical. So, that part of it is quite easy. The things that become more challenging is if you start putting in certain ingredients that you may want to check, like colors or food agents. Some of those are not allowed in Canada, and they are allowed in the United States. So that's when you need to start checking and making sure that before you take a product from the United States to Canada and vice versa, what are some of the regulations, especially on those items that may be restricted.
Gotcha. So when it comes to distribution, how is that? Who are the major players in Canada that they should know? And does it operate a little differently than in the United States?
Distribution is quite similar. They have some of the players are the same. So, for instance, Core-Mark, is in Canada and part of the whole wholesale distribution network. And then within Canada, I think the major difference, especially if you're looking at the food or the drug side, is that we have Canadian food players that are quite large, such as the Loblaws of the world, the Sobeys of the world, and it's really understanding, what's your opportunity with those bigger players within the Canadian market. That's where I think there are a lot of dissimilarities in the fact that the big food players in the U.S. are not the big food players in Canada, and vice versa. With the exception of Walmart and Costco. Outside of those two big American players, that basically is it. And the same if you look at the drug area, drugstores. The drugstores are dominated in Canada by Canadian players. So if you're looking to go in that route, obviously you'll need to play with those big players, which are Canadians, right?
Gotcha. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about culture and cross-cultural differences, if there are any. When I'm dealing with a Canadian buyer, well, first of all, just culturally, the market itself, are there cultural differences that might impact someone's going to market in Canada?
I think our cultures are very similar, and that's really why it's comfortable, working with Canada or working with the U.S. They're logical trade partners, right? For that reason.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and say there are not cultural differences. Obviously, there are. However, I think the main challenge for anyone coming into the Canadian market, especially as a company from the United States, is just to realize that there are differences and not to assume that it's an extension of the United States. And I think that's really, if you're going to make a cultural blunder, it's to assume that it's an extension of the United States. There are differences culturally, and I'm not going to be a culture expert and get into those. But obviously, that they're there, they exist. But because we're very similar, therefore it's an easy relationship.
Great. So once we get to the buyer meeting, right? They have the meeting scheduled, whether it's on their own or through ECRM. You've participated in a couple of those. So if the buyer's preparing for the meeting, what are some of the things that's important for them to address? Are there any things in addition to the packaging, certifications, distribution? How should they approach the meeting?
Well, I think the first thing prior to the meeting is to be very clear. You are able at this point in time to enter the Canadian market, yes or no, right? And I don't, as a Canadian buyer, I don't mind meeting with American buyers who say we're not sure whether or not we can enter the Canadian market, and we can have a discussion and take it from there. But they should be very clear whether or not they can go to Canada or whether or not they're just exploring going to Canada, because they're very different. Because there are the labels, requirements, and there are other requirements. But as a Canadian buyer, I want to make sure that you've done your homework, right?
Yeah.
That's the, at least as a discussion point, you've done your homework and you know that you are able to go to Canada or not. If I get someone in there, and I'm using this as an example, if they're a CBD, if they have a beverage that has CBD in it, and they're approaching me and I'm going, well, I can't sell it. You should have done your homework because you know that you can't sell CBD products, outside of the marijuana stores in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So, marijuana is legal all across Canada, right? And, but it can only be sold in marijuana stores, for example, right?
Yeah.
So, do your homework, make sure you know what you can sell and whether you're prepared to go in Canada. And that's the pre-meeting, right? Once you're in the meeting, that when that discussion happens and we go through that, I think the follow-up from that is, and this is a common mistake, is when you're sending samples to Canada, you need to realize, are there duties, are there tariffs, and they need to be prepaid before you ship the samples, because otherwise they get caught in the border, sent back, and the whole process starts again, right? And that just shows another indicator that you're not sure what the rules and regulations are with your products or your services, right? So it's really, doing your homework and understanding, what can I do, and am I ready to go? And once I'm ready to go, right, let's make sure that we can, move quickly on that partnership and doing business together.
And that's an especially important point these days, where we're not meeting in person, so samples are part of the process. And if they can't get those samples to you, that's a big problem.
Right. Exactly.
Great. Excellent. So now if I'm a supplier and I'm on my way, let's say I'm not fully, ready, but I'm on my way and taking the steps, it's fine is it okay if I have the meeting with you and
absolutely
just be clear and
transparent
about it?
As long as I know, as long as you're very upfront right from the beginning to say, we're not sure if this is an opportunity or not, let's explore, right? And that's fine. I think both, from a buyer and a retailer, we are willing to explore these things. There's different, opportunities that you may not have seen for whatever reason. So therefore, sure, let's have those discussions, realizing that, at the end of the meeting, you might say it's not an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's, that is fine.
And if it's something that you really want to have in your stores, you can maybe point them in the right direction of how to complete the rest of the steps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we've in many meetings that we've had in the past, having done this for, 5+ years, we've had a lot of discussions with people who go, look, I just don't know how to go about doing this, and said, look, here's some direction that you can do in order to get to that point of being able to sell your product in Canada. And, we understand that sometimes you just don't have the expertise. That's fine. But here's an opportunity to figure out what you can do and whether or not it is an opportunity for you. If you haven't, if I'm a supplier and I'm in New York State and I think that my next state to go to is the state of Canada, that's probably not a good decision for you, right? Explore beyond, the other 49 states that you want to explore before coming to Canada, right?
Yep. Even though it may be closer than the other states.
Exactly. And you may think that it's easy because you just got to go across Niagara Falls. It's not the case.
Excellent. Well, thanks for all the information, and I look forward to seeing you at our future sessions. And this is really good stuff. And it just points to the fact that, again, why not do business in Canada? It's as long as you get your ducks lined up and all of your packaging and certifications ready, it's a great opportunity. So thanks again.
No problem. My pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks, Joe.